And that's what climate change is about. It is literally, not figuratively, a clear and present danger.
We are in the beginning of a mass extinction.
The ability of CO2 to do the heavy work of creating a climate catastrophe is almost nil at this point.
The price of oil has been artificially elevated to the point of insanity.
That's not how you power a modern industrial system.
The ultimate goal of this renewable energy, plan is to reach the exact same point that we're at now.
You know who's tried that? Germany. 7 straight days of no wind for Germany. Their factories are shutting down.
They really do act like weather didn't happen prior to 1910.
Today is Friday.
That's right, Greta. It is Friday. It's the most important day of the week because it is the day the Heartland Institute broadcasts the Climate Realism Show. I'm Jim Lakely, Vice President of the Heartland Institute. There is nothing else like the Climate Realism Show streaming anywhere. So I hope you will like, share, subscribe, and leave your comments underneath this video. These all convince YouTube's algorithm to smile upon this program, and it gets the show in front of more people. And a quick reminder, because big tech and the legacy media do not approve of the way we cover climate and energy policy on this program, Heartland's YouTube channel has been demonetized. So if you want to support this program, and I certainly hope you do, please visit heartland.org/TCRS. That's heartland.org/TCRS. That stands for The Climate Realism Show. And that will help us keep producing this program every single week. Any support you can give is warmly welcome and greatly appreciated. And we also want to thank today our streaming partners, junkscience.com, CFACT, and What's Up With That. I know we have a lot of people watching this on X, and we welcome you to the show and glad you are there. But we are going to have a terrific show, and so let's get right to it. Today we have with us, as usual, Anthony Watts. He's the Senior Fellow at the Heartland Institute and publisher of the most influential climate website in the world, What's Up With That. Also with us is H. Sterling Burnett, Director of the Arthur B. Robinson Center on Climate and Environmental Policy at the Heartland Institute. And also, of course, Linnea Lueken, Research Fellow for Energy and Environment Policy at Heartland. She is also the star host of our Climate at a Glance video series right here on the Heartland Institute's YouTube channel and on Rumble. We topped 600,000 views on that series of videos just this past week, and for good reason. So be sure to check those out right here on this very channel. Greetings, everyone, on this nice fall feeling day, at least in Northern Illinois in late summer. How y'all doing?
Doing well.
Doing well here. It's I wouldn't say it's fall feeling, but
Yeah, I'm over summer. It's time for it to end.
Yeah.
I'm done with this global warming stuff. Time for global cooling.
Yeah, I'm comfortably sitting in my fossil fuel driven air conditioned home.
Indeed.
Fantastic. All right. Well, let's just get rolling. We have Anthony Watts' favorite segment. We have a nice drop for it. Hit it, Andy.
I still think the music for that would be Johnny Cash's "I Fell Into a Burning Ring of Fire."
No, I like the German Oompa polka music.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Anthony, we can't afford the rights to that music, so it has to be royalty free. And I think it's fun. I also have a one themed with Greta that maybe we'll have to drop sometime. Maybe we'll have our audience vote on that for us in the future. But anyway, our first crazy climate news story of the week comes to us from the Daily Express. Headline is Project 2025 plan to stop wildfires is just cut down forests, and experts are mortified. The story reads that Project 2025 proposes increasing commercial logging to deal with the wildfire crisis, although ecologists and fire experts say it will make the problem worse. While many of the core policy principles of the Project 2025 are known, one critical policy that could lead to climate ruin has swept under the radar. The project proposes an increase in commercial logging as a means to curbing wildfires, although experts say the opposite would happen. The forestry chapter in Project 2025, which, by the way, Donald Trump has disavowed and said he had nothing to do with, just saying for the record, That chapter was written by Darren Bast from Heritage Foundation Policy Research Fellow and Policy Advisor for the Heartland Institute, a notorious climate denial think tank in Washington, D.C. All right, got to fact check this right away. We are not based in Washington, D.C. We are based in Northern Illinois, but just make sure
another fact check. Darren's not with Heritage anymore. He's been with CEI for 8 months or more.
There you go. So, you can't trust the media. You always have to do your own research. Anyway, we'll just quickly wrap this up here. Bast's policy prescription is for the Forest Service to, quote, focus on proactive management of the forests and grasslands that does not depend heavily on burning, rejecting the indigenous-backed practice of controlled burns. Now, Anthony, we're going to go to you first because you've lived most of your life, or all of it, maybe, in fire country. One of the worst wildfires in California history a few years ago was near your home. Many fires, in fact, have been right at your doorstep. And so you must know this issue better than most anyone. So what do you make of this story claiming that, one, ecologists think commercial logging would actually make wildfires worse, and two, that the indigenous-backed practice of controlled burns is wrong for us Western societies to reject?
Well, let's take the second claim first. Indians knew the land far better than anyone in Northern America. They lived with the land. They were, so to speak, one with the land. And so they understood the value of control burn. They understood its value for keeping fires from getting out of control, but also to renew grasses and trees and so forth. There are certain pine trees in California that cannot reproduce unless there's a fire hot enough to open up the pine cones. And so fire is a necessary part of the natural order of things. We have been suppressing it since, the Forest Service was put together. And we've also been messing with the whole, forest management issue. And the idea that, logging a forest would cause it to be worse in terms of fire danger is absolutely absurd. The reason being is that loggers in today's world, not like the slash and burn guys, from a century ago, but today's world, the logging industry is very concerned with repopulating the forest, putting in new saplings, putting in, safeguards against fire danger, that sort of thing. So they're going to manage the land appropriately and safely. So that claim is just bogus.
All right. Now, Sterling, I know you have quite a bit of expertise on this as well, and you wanted to weigh in.
Yeah, I've written on this a lot, including a couple of peer-reviewed articles on forest fires. And I guess I don't want to get into the history of the Native Americans, but they didn't manage. They started, but they couldn't put them out. So they went where they went. And sometimes it worked out and sometimes it didn't work out. California and the West had million-acre wildfires every year for hundreds of years. Large wildfires aren't new. But under management, someone said, logging trees that take out CO2 that's not a good idea. The trees they're taking out are largely dead and dying trees. In the Western forest of the United States, managed by the federal government, I use that in scare quotes because there's not much management going on. They adopted a new policy after Reagan under Bush of let forests take their course. So that means burn, baby, burn. They under the Forest Service, they logged them. There is currently in the Western forest more dead and dying timber than live timber. And you can't go in and take them out. Under Reagan, about 12 million board feet per year were being logged, and we had logging roads. There were problems with a lot of the logging roads, but then we had logging roads to get in, not just to do the logging, but to fight the fires when they started, long before they got to inhabited areas in the back, in the back country, as opposed to letting them get to Los Angeles before you can put them out. Since then, under various administrations, logging has dropped to.
Nope. Sterling, we kind of lost you there.
That is a disaster. It has been a disaster. At the same time, you've got logging roads being ripped out, and you've got more people moving into areas. They want to live. Ooh, I want to live in the woods. They don't keep the brush out. So it's not just salvage logging. It's clear cutting in some areas, which creates large fire breaks. But it's taking out the trash. It's taking out what's called slash. You can't leave that, or that just builds up more fire. But you've got some forests where there's 900 trees, spindly dog hair like trees in an acre where there used to be 30. You've got too much fuel, and so you're getting large forest fires make a comeback.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to find a way to get the picture up here. I have family that live in Anchorage, and we this summer we were fortunate enough to visit, and we went all over the Kenai Peninsula and all places around there. And we drove to Seward one day, and we passed forests that were just full of like half dead trees. The bark beetles got to them, and it was actually kind of scary to even look at, because that it's eventually going to go. And there are nature kind of nature tourism things there that are very much in danger. Of course, there are people that live there that have their it could just be completely destroyed, and it would take almost nothing at all to start that, and it would just be crazy. In fact, there's lots of that. That it's not uncommon. Obviously, it's wilderness, so you're going to have fires. But they have policies in place that will not. It just seems madness to be driving past these forest groves and see that 1/3 of the spruce trees are brown and black amongst all the other healthy trees. But at least half of them in some of these groves were dead, and it's just a matter of time. I mean, it's inevitable. And if the policy is that you can't take out those dead and die, it just doesn't make any sense to me. Maybe you guys can explain to me, why would there be a policy preventing you from taking out easily removed trees from that would prevent these sorts of fires, or at least make them less likely to happen? Why is that? Why would such a policy be in place?
There's no good reason. The only reason is the administration has been captured by environmentalists who have said, we want to let nature take its course. Nature knows best. You hear them say it all the time. Well, they think nature is some conscious entity. It's not. It's random. And when you let fuel build up, when fires come, they burn big and they burn hot. And it even destroys some of the, it can destroy the microbes in the soil, which help forestry grow. If you look at, compare what happened on federal forest after Mount St. Helens exploded, compared to private and state forest in the region. Federal forests still look like a moonscape because nothing has been done to reforest and replant that, because we're letting nature take its course. State and private lands have been reforested, and they're logging them again because they don't want their forest to burn down again. It's madness. Yeah. It's not good for the ecology either. I mean, when these fires happen, wildlife habitat is destroyed. Wild animals are killed in the thousands. And if you're worried about CO2, it sure puts a lot of carbon dioxide into the air. Dead and dying trees ain't taking carbon dioxide out of the air, but burning trees are sure putting it in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Linnea, you're not from Wyoming, but you're wearing your University of Wyoming Cowboys hat, and so you spent some time out west. You must have something to say about this. I mean, wildfires there. And before you get started, here's a picture, and I confused the heck out of Andy there for a second, but this is a picture from my my phone of those trees, those spruce trees. I think they're spruce. I would think that's actually in that grove, and it goes on for miles and miles actually, where 2/3, 3/4 of those trees are just tinder.
Yep. Well, and that was one of the issues. I think I spoke about it last week on the show. One of the early issues that I became acquainted with when I moved out to Wyoming was the lands issue, the federal management versus state and local or private management, and how much worse the feds were doing at keeping their property resistant to fire. And then, of course, once their stuff starts burning, a fire isn't going to say, oh, well, here's the property line. I can't go onto that private land now. No, it's going to roar through someone's cattle ranch and kill all their beefalo or whatever it is that they're raising there. So it's a major problem out west. It's part of the reason why Utah is going ahead with their lawsuit that they have filed in the Supreme Court to try and see if the federal government even has the constitutional right to own as much land as they do in the West. And the Utah's argument is that no, that they do not have a constitutional right to hold land that they're not even using, that they're just letting sit there and kind of waste away. So yeah, it's a major issue, especially out west. And I see in our comment section, we have a lot of people in the West and also in Florida, and they're talking about how they have pines dying out and stuff, and those things just stand there like a bunch of kindling, and it's 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 not exactly a safe set of conditions to maintain.
Yeah.
Well, that's what they're called, Albert. They're called beefalo.
That's right.
The hybrids that they grow, they're
That's
great.
right. That's
They
right,
taste
yeah.
good too.
Delicious. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I just thought that was worth noting because, just the idea that that it would mortify so-called experts to log to help reduce the fuel of a fire. I mean, it's just insane. So anyway, let's move on to our second item, which is shared with us by Anthony Watts. And this is from the New York Times. The headline is "Climate Change Can Cause Bridges to Fall Apart Like Tinkertoys, Experts Say." Again, more experts say. So they write that extreme heat and flooding are accelerating the deterioration of bridges, engineers say, posing a quiet but growing threat. This story by the New York Times highlights a bridge linking the Bronx and Manhattan getting stuck in the open position, and it happened in New York. So this matters. Everyone must pay attention. A railroad bridge connecting Iowa and South Dakota collapsed in floodwaters, and the concrete buckled and broke on a bridge in Lewiston, Maine, and they blamed that on, quote, recent fluctuation in temperature and rain. All right. So the story goes on to note that America's bridges, a quarter of which were built before 1960, were already in need of repair, but now extreme heat and increased flooding linked to climate change are accelerating the disintegration of the nation's bridges, engineers say, essentially causing them to age prematurely. Quote, "We have a bridge crisis that is specifically tied to extreme weather events," said Paul Chanowski, a professor of civil engineering at the University of Colorado Boulder, who researches the effects of climate change on infrastructure. Interesting. Quote, "These are not things that would happen under normal climate circumstances," he claims. "These are not things that we have ever seen at this rate," unquote. So I know, Anthony, you did a post on this at our climaterealism.com website, but I first want to ask Sterling, what a shock it is that an academic whose funding and career depends on finding the effects of climate change on infrastructure happens to find a lot of climate change effects on infrastructure when it's convenient to him.
Yeah, I'm sure that his funding will increase, and I'm sure probably the study was funded by the federal government that he did. It's discouraging to see stuff like this. Bridges weren't built for an extra 1 degree temperature; they collapse. Well, that's poor engineering, if that's the case. You look at these bridges. They talk like this is a new phenomenon. Hundreds of railroad bridges have been destroyed by flooding over the years in the world and the U.S. Flooding in the regions they've talked about are common. They've been recording it since we've had records since the 1850s out in Iowa and South Dakota. Not new. The bridges in question are old. They were built when there was much fewer people traversing them and much lighter loads. They weren't built for electric vehicles or huge 18-wheelers. And they haven't been maintained. In fact, the U.S. government itself says that about 40% of the bridges in the U.S. are in poor condition. They haven't, even after they were built, even if the engineering was great at the time, You got to maintain these things. And so when you don't maintain them over time, they deteriorate. Now, Anthony and I looked at the, in particular at the bridge in Maine, and I know you did as well, Jim. The temperature fluctuated less during the time that this buckled than it normally does every year.
Right.
Normally, there's a 20-degree gap between the nighttime, the daytime highs and the nighttime lows. 21 degrees in June. This time, the temperatures only fluctuated 15 degrees. So where's the wild fluctuation?
Yeah.
True. So go ahead, Anthony. I know you covered this on climate realism, and you loved the Tinkertoys idea.
Yeah, it was just, this is one of the stupidest stories I've ever seen, but it's been tried before. Way back in 2007, when the I-35 West Bridge collapsed in Minneapolis, the Center for American Progress and Joe Rum, Jolton Joe Rum, as we used to call him, came out with an article saying, well, it's climate change that caused the bridge to collapse. And, we all rolled our eyes back then. And of course, when the investigation went through and came out, the reason that the bridge collapsed was twofold. Number one, they had put in some gusset plates for the bridge stiffening that were too small for the job. That's number one. There was an engineering error, human error. And then number two, they were in the process of refurbishing the bridge. And without paying attention to loading concerns, the construction company loaded over 500,000 pounds, 579,000 pounds worth of equipment and sand and gravel onto the structure. So it was overloaded and it was weak from the get-go because of the wrong engineering done on it for the plate. Where's the climate change in that? There isn't any. And that's why this whole thing is bogus. The New York Times didn't even do a modicum of research. They just took a couple of experts who said, oh, it's climate change that's causing this. We're experts. Listen to us. It took me literally 2 or 3 minutes to go through Google and find data that basically blows their story completely out of the water. And we published it on Climate Realism, and it'll also be on WhatsApp with that later today. I suggest you read it because it's a prime example of so-called professional reporters going out there and writing a slapdash piece of junk article trying to link climate change where there's no linkage whatsoever.
Yeah.
Engineer guy made a crack that all that the billions, trillions on the infrastructure bill, the bipartisan infrastructure bill.
Yeah.
Hey, where'd it go? Well, it's not going to bridges. It's going to build EV chargers at a rate of $39 million per charger that are built in the private sector for about $6,500 per charger.
Yeah.
So there you go.
They've built 8.
No. As I wrote in Climate Change Weekly, it's up to 15. 2.4 billion for 15 charging stations, 61 units.
Yeah.
In other words, individual chargers at a station. So
the rest is overhead, right?
Yeah, it's 160. It's like 169 million per charging station, 39 per actual charger. For the most expensive, class 3, the best chargers there are, the fastest chargers there are in the private sector. It's $45,000 per. But these are class 2. The most expensive there is about $12,000 a piece. So I'd say we're overpaying. It makes those gold-plated toilets and the $1,000 wrenches the people complain about the military using look cheap by comparison.
Yeah.
How much affordable, energy-efficient housing could you build with that money? How many cancer patients could you treat with that money? How many trees could you plant with that money? That's where the infrastructure money is going.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, you alluded to this, Sterling, but when I saw the story and we were kicking it around this week as something to bring up on the show, specifically the people in Lewiston, Maine, were claiming that it was extreme weather, extreme temperature fluctuations, and rain. That it would happen. Rain happens, for crying out loud, and bridges are designed to withstand them, of course, up to a certain point. But they even showed a picture, and the picture had it it was basically just concrete on the steel bridge that had buckled and flaked off a little bit. But I actually, it made me want to look up the data specifically for Lewiston, Maine, because the person said recent fluctuations in temperature. So I looked it up, and in the month of June, which is when the story was published, in the first week of June, they had a high of 80, and their lowest high of that week was 59, and then they had lows in the 50s, in the high 40s. In the second week of June, they had a high of 84 and a low high of 70, and then lows of 43 to 59. Again, that's pretty darn normal. The week the story hit, though, they had a high of 95 and a low high of 71, and lows between 45 and 68. And then the fourth week of June, they had a high of 85, a low high of 71, and lows again between 64 and 47. So then I decided I would just pick a random year out of the hat. 1988. Actually, that's the year that Al Gore and James Hansen marched into Congress and started the whole global warming scare on Capitol Hill that day. And the weather in that week was actually almost exactly the same. There was a 3-day heat wave in June 1988 in Lewiston, Maine, just like there was this year. They had their highs, their lowest high, and their range of low temperatures at night were almost exactly identical. And so it blows my mind. And this is, I guess, Anthony, why this is one of the stories that's one of the dumbest stories you've ever seen. And that's saying something with what we cover on this show. But it just blows my mind that the New York Times and even that professor can't do a 2-minute Google search to debunk themselves or to even fact check themselves. That's literally how long it took me to find this data.
Yeah, same here. And this story was so bad, I gave it a special award. I gave it a Twilight Zone award, and I sent that out on Twitter today, shaming the New York Times and Coral Davenport, the author of this. Imagine, if you will, a world where climate swoops down out of the skies, smashing bridges like Tinkertoys.
Yeah.
That's what they're basically saying.
Yeah.
It is Twilight Zone. This whole story was science fiction.
Yeah,
Yep.
When was the hottest temperature record set in Lewiston, Maine? Early July of 1911, 113 years of global warming ago. Yeah. The hottest temperature in Maine itself, totally, 115 degrees on the same July date in 1911. Actually, two dates. It hit it twice, July 4th and July 11th in 1911. In Bridgeton, Maine, which is 31 whole miles away from Lewiston. So these temperatures they're rarely exceed 90s in June, but they've certainly happened, and bridges weren't collapsing back then.
Yep.
And here's the thing that really blows my mind. Does the New York Times really think that civil engineers don't have the capacity to plan for temperature variations when they build steel bridges or concrete and steel bridges? Of course they do. There's standard tables for this sort of stuff. And I will tell you this, any engineer worth a damn will always produce a product that's it's at least 20%, sometimes as much as 30 or 40% over-engineered to handle excesses that they might not have accounted for. And so, this whole idea that, climate is swooping down out of the skies and destroying bridges is just absolutely bogus.
Yeah, well, when engineers when engineers screw up, people die, and that's why they do over-engineer it. When a climate scientist is wrong, nobody dies except common sense dies and science dies.
Yeah,
but the 20% margin, it may be sufficient in the early years of a bridge, but if you increase the population by more than 50% and you increase the load by much more than that 20% margin, and you leave the bridge untended, largely unmaintained for 50 or 70 years, you're going to have problems.
Yeah, it's kind of like forest. If you don't manage it, it's going to go boom.
That's not poor engineering. Engineers, when they design these things, sort of expect, I suspect, that people are going to maintain the bridge that they built.
Right. But they're not maintaining.
When you build a house, I'd love it to be the case that my house was built and I never had to maintain anything. Nothing ever broke. The roof never had to be replaced. The foundation never had to be fixed. I'd love that. That's not my experience with houses. My suspicion is it's not anyone's experience with bridges.
Yep. Well, and the last thing I'll say about this, and we'll move on to our third item, but Coral Davenport, I'm going to call you out, Coral, if you're watching. You know better than this. You have attended at least 2 of the Heartland Institute's 15 international conferences on climate change. You have my email. You know how to get a hold of us. And so if you were remotely interested in having a semblance of balance in these alarmist stories, you know where to go, and you just don't do it because either you don't want to, or your editors are making you peddle lies and alarmist dogma and not actual news. So just have to say that. So hi, Coral. Hope you're watching. All right, let's move on to our third item here. And that is from a fantastic website called American Greatness. House GOP pressures NOAA over promotion of global warming narrative. Now, this is something we've covered quite a bit, so I wanted to point it out again today since it's relatively recent. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, is facing scrutiny from Republicans in the U.S. House of Representatives over its promotion of data which falsely claims that so-called global warming is real. That's what American Greatness writes. And then the Daily Caller had reported that a letter was sent to NOAA by congressional Republicans, and it demanded information from the agency on its, quote, billion-dollar disasters data set called BDD, which has been frequently cited by the Biden-Harris administration as evidence that all future natural gas deals and other similar ventures must be halted due to fear of global warming. This was most recently actually cited by the Biden and Harris administration just last year. From the story, the congressional letter further warned that the existence and the use of the BDD data could constitute a violation of NOAA's own rules on scientific integrity, prioritizing political agenda over empirical fact and scientific truth. The letter also demanded that NOAA provide clarification with regards to its methodology, as well as an explanation of why its data set does not adjust for variables such as gross domestic product. Now, Anthony, I'll go back to you here to start. The letter notes that while NOAA was finally shamed into properly adjusting this data set for inflation, it still doesn't, I don't think, properly take into account for population increases in storm zones and other factors in their annual scare report.
Yeah, well, one of the most glaring omissions in it is they're not paying attention to the coastlines. People love to live by the ocean. This is a proven fact. People flock to the oceans. They want to be there for vacation, right? So we've got more homes, more hotels, bungalows, rentals, all that kind of stuff being built up along the shores. And so that increases the retail value of the real estate there. And it's a self-perpetuating thing. The more real estate that gets built, the more it jacks itself up generally, And so what happens is that NOAA just assumes some sort of a linear relationship, but that's not true at all. The fact is that damages along the coast from hurricanes and other types of ocean storms are much, much more than what we're seeing in America's heartland, like from tornadoes and so forth. And so there's this strong bias based on the fact that people like to live and vacation near the coast, and that's where a lot of infrastructure is being built. And, back in the day, they didn't pay attention to hurricane strengthening. And now we've had hurricane strengthening rules, and damages aren't as bad as they used to be for some hotels and other things. But the bottom line is that if a Cat 5 hurricane rolls down the coast, any part of the United States, it's going to destroy pretty much everything. And the billion-dollar disaster is going to be because it was a popular place to build.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Sterling, when the what was it, 1901, the hurricane, one of the strongest storms ever recorded, certainly at the time, slammed into Galveston, Texas. I think I have my memory on that correct. When it did that in 1901, there was barely anybody there. It was a very powerful and destructive storm. But if it was to hit Galveston today, obviously the billions of dollars of damage would be so much more than it was when it was basically wooden homes, wooden houses, and almost like the Wild West.
Well, Galveston was actually very populated in the early part of the century. That's why the death toll was so tremendous. There were more deaths during that hurricane, I think, than any other in the United States history, because Galveston was one of the most populated cities in Texas at that time. A lot of people don't know it. Galveston was one of the 3 or 4 biggest cities in Texas at one time. So you know, in the end, you're right about one thing, Jim. There's something called the increasing bullseye effect, the expanding bullseye effect, where people move to areas that are, you know, great location. They look good. Look, why is wildfire damage increasing if you don't take into account GDP growth and inflation and stuff like that? Well, because more and more people are moving to forests. They find forested areas attractive.
Yeah.
They move to coast because they're attractive. I think something like some absurdly high number of people in the United States live within 25 miles of a coast. So, but even where you don't have it in the coast, where are cities located along in the U.S.? Where were they historically located? Well, they were along rivers. Why? Transportation was rivers. So you've got major cities on rivers and lakes that flood. These cities have grown. You've got them growing dramatically on the coasts. You've got them growing in the forests. Well, guess what? When any disaster strikes, you're going to have more and more people affected and more property, and expensive property. When you dredge a swamp, remove the bait shacks and tar paper homes that used to be there and replace them with luxury condos and hotels, when a hurricane strikes, it's much more expensive.
Yep.
Yeah, but the press and environmentalists rush to blame climate change in any instance, it seems, which I call situational shoehorning. They're always after trying to figure out a way to shoehorn climate change into any kind of weather event.
Yep, for sure. All right. Well, Sterling, you wanted to address something. There's we love our our comments in our chat right here. And not everybody is a super fan of the show and of Linnea and of Sterling and of Anthony. Once in a while we get people that don't like us, but that's fine. You're here, you're listening, you're watching, you're learning, I hope, and you're very welcome to be here. But Vale S, we have to address something right here.
You have to address it. I want to address a few things from him. First off, he said something like, it's a little bit farther up. It's like 69% of all wildlife has died since 1969 or 70 or something like that. There it is. 69%. Really? All the animals in the world throughout history have died. 69% of them since 1970. That's just stupid. That's idiotic to say that. In fact, wildlife populations, lots of them, are growing. We have more deer now than we had in 1970. We have more raccoons. We have more wild hogs. I can guarantee you that. Now, have extinctions gone up? Well, extinctions are a hard thing to measure, but it doesn't account for 69% of all wildlife. So, don't throw out numbers when you have no idea. That's not a fact. You said these are facts. Secondly, you attack us for receiving oil. Check it out, you say. Well, check it out. Someone responded, well, we've never received any oil money. That's not true. But we haven't received money since what? I think it's 2007. So going on 17 years now. It may be longer. We didn't receive oil money from the time we started our international climate change conferences. We haven't received $1 for any of those from oil and gas companies. So get your facts straight, Vale. Don't make assumptions. We wish we were getting oil money to support this program. We aren't. Not a dime.
Yeah, they don't even know, most of the oil companies don't even know who the hell we are. Seriously. I mean, it's a convenient lie that the left pushes to smear something they don't like. They don't even bother to look up the reality. They don't. They just take the word of someone else who's already said the lie and say, oh, well, it must be true. I'll repeat it. And that's exactly what this person is doing. We don't have any oil funding. I don't have any oil funding. I wish I did. We could do a much better program and reach many more people if we had big oil funding. But this is why we put up stuff at the beginning saying, please donate. Here's our page. Well, this is entirely self-generated. There is no corporate sponsorship in this whatsoever. And if you think that that actually does, you are deluding yourself.
What I would like to point out too is I would if you're really interested in oil and gas companies, funding things and you're worried about, Exxon having influence, go ahead and look up who the major funders are for pretty much every major green organization on the planet. You're going to see a whole lot of big oil on those lists. So this is not not an argument that's overly compelling to me.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So welcome, Vale. We're glad you're watching the program. I hope you will learn something, and I hope
Yeah.
you will absorb the truth that we are not funded by big oil at the Heartland Institute. It's just not true. I always, I've been with the Heartland Institute since 2008, and our funding from Exxon ended before I even got here, and I feel like I've been with Heartland all my life at this point. But sometimes I do wonder, when is the statute
Yeah,
of
and was it the
limitations?
funding back in 2006 for a healthcare study of some
It was
kind?
for a healthcare study, correct?
Right.
So it's like, and the Heartland Institute's never adjusted what we do or what we say based on funding. And like I said, our corporate funding is nil. It's zero for this program and for our climate projects, and that is just the truth.
Yeah.
And sometimes I just wonder, when does the statute of limitations on being big oil funded ever end? We're getting on 2 freaking decades now, and the money that we did get was, not that much. It was spread out over many, many years. I don't want to belabor this point, but I think it's important to maybe to finish with that point that Linnea made, that if you look at the corporate funding of the foundations of a lot of the biggest corporations, including fossil fuel companies around the world, they are funneling millions and millions and millions of dollars to green advocacy groups that are pushing for, basically the destruction of our energy economy by transitioning to green stuff that isn't actually green. So, all right, we're going to move on. But thank you, and we hope you stick around, Vale, and bring some friends next time. We can get into a nice discussion. All right. So our main topic today is probably the first and only presidential debate that we're going to get between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris is on Tuesday. For a while now, climate alarmists, I've seen them in my inbox at work. They keep complaining that the climate crisis has gotten short shrift at the presidential debates. And so ABC is going to be rigging this one in favor of Kamala for sure, like they all are. And perhaps the moderators will be guilted into bringing up climate and energy policy. That's just what I'm predicting, maybe. And so this topic is probably not, I'm sure Kamala Harris and her campaign think that if they are asked about climate, that this is a real position of strength for her. And I think we would here on this show disagree, but only if Donald Trump handles this topic correctly. So, Mr. President, if you are listening, or if your staff is listening, write down these helpful tips that we're going to give you if they bring up the climate topic in the limited time that you're even going to have for this. So we identified as a group here 4 things that we think Trump should bring up if climate is mentioned in the debate. 1 is that there is no climate crisis. 2 is going to be EVs and appliance mandates. Third one, he could talk about oil and gas drilling, and then talk about the green energy, supposedly green energy power transition. So we'll take it from the top here, that there is no climate crisis. So Sterling, Burnett, how should Trump make the point that there is no climate crisis succinctly?
Well, if the question comes up about climate change, Kamala's going to say it's an existential threat because she said that before. The most important thing facing us, and he should, he likes to say climate change is a hoax. Climate change is not a hoax. The climate crisis is a hoax, and his response should be, there is no climate crisis. Show me the data where hurricanes, tornadoes, flooding, droughts, wildfires are getting worse, where people are doing worse because of climate change. It doesn't exist. Data doesn't exist. And then he should dismiss it. If you can't show data, not some expert that the New York Times quotes on bridges, then we've got nothing to talk about.
Right. Anthony, what advice would you give Trump on how to talk about the climate crisis, so-called climate crisis?
Well, As Sterling pointed out, it's all about the data. I mean, you can go shout climate crisis just like the sky is falling as much as you want. But when you go and look at the data, and we've got the data, go to climateataglance.com, and we have all the talking points about things that are supposedly getting worse due to climate change. And we're using data from NOAA and the Environmental Protection Agency and other government agencies and trusted sources to point out that there is no evidence whatsoever that things are getting worse. Even the IPCC, in their most recent AR6 report, published a chart that showed all of the different kinds of weather effects that go on. Looking at severe weather, flooding, fires, all this kind of stuff. And they can't find a climate emergent signal in most of these. A couple of them, they found some, yes, but the vast majority of them have no evidence now or even projected into the future of having a climate emergent signal in the data. So what does that tell you? The climate crisis is entirely generated by media and climate activists. It's not in the data.
Excellent way to put it. And I hope he does that. We shall see. He tends to freelance a little bit, but his campaign, I know for sure, is informed on this issue. And I think his EPA was the least damaging EPA to our economy and our freedom in my lifetime. So maybe we'll get a repeat of that. All right, let's take the second item here, which is EV and appliance mandates. Linnea, I think this is one that really hits Kamala Harris pretty hard, no matter how far she may try to run from it. She sponsored a bill that would phase out the internal combustion engine vehicle by, I think it was 2030 or 2035, maybe by 2050, but it was a ban. It was a mandate. It was a ban on regular cars and a mandate for electric vehicles or hydrogen vehicles, which are not practical. So yeah, I want you to hit this issue. I know that's something you like.
When it comes to Kamala or Kamala, however her name is pronounced properly, it is worthless to believe a single thing she says in terms of where she stands on any particular policy at any particular time, because she is the vice president right now. And she's on the road talking about how she doesn't support, or her staffers more are saying that she doesn't support an EV mandate. She doesn't do this. She doesn't support banning fracking, blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, the Biden administration has been pursuing these issues. They have not been as successful as they would have liked to have been, but they have been pursuing them when she is currently in office. So it's like we're taking crazy pills with this campaign so far. I guess it's gaslighting. I don't think gaslighting is actually the right word for it, but it's just lying. It's impossible to trust her on any of these issues. And you shouldn't. When it comes to Trump, really all he has to say is, you're in office right now. You've been in office for the last couple of years. So where was this then? You had no influence whatsoever over the Biden administration. You were the vice president. So yeah.
No,
She probably told Joe about all this stuff, but he forgot about it immediately.
Tell her you cast the vote that passed the Inflation Reduction Act.
Yep.
You are responsible for that act. You could have voted no. You could have abstained. It wouldn't have passed. You are responsible for that act. And that act, as Biden just today finally admitted, it was misnamed the Inflation Reduction Act. It's done nothing to reduce inflation. It wasn't about inflation. It was about green energy spending. Now, she has said repeatedly in the past she'd ban fracking. She has said she would ban plastic straws. She promoted the Biden administration's push to end gas stoves and other appliances, and then comes out with a video with her and her husband cooking on a gas their turkey dinner on a gas stove. What's good for us is not good for you, evidently. She is lying to get through the election. Why are the environmentalists not pushing her on this? Because they want her elected. And so they're willing to not criticize her for her stances on, oh yeah, we got to have LNG. They banned LNG. They stopped new exports. Now they've started them again, under a court order, by the way.
Yeah.
She wants to stop drilling on public lands. She wants to stop offshore drilling. Oh, no, we're not going to talk about any of that. We're not going to push her on it. We'll let her be silent or have her surrogates go out and say, no, she doesn't stand for that anymore.
Right.
She won't say it. She's not saying it in public forum. She's letting them speak for her. By contrast, Trump directly says, I don't support 2025. And they say, oh, well, Trump people are behind 2025. So, he really supports it.
Right. And they won't stop talking about it.
Yes.
It's never been more clear, and it's been getting worse on this front for the last decade, I would say. But this year in particular, it has never been so clear that people on the general left in our political ecosystem and people on the general right in our political ecosystem live in entirely different realities. Now, and it seems that the people on the left can be very easily steered and have like unbelievably short memories, and they are completely willing to just like forget what happened, yesterday, or what the general narrative was yesterday. As soon as the new programming or the new software update comes, they just suck that up and they say, oh yeah, no, we never were against banning fracking, or we never were for banning fracking, rather. It's unbelievable to witness.
No,
Go ahead. And I think it's just lying. I think most of the people, at least in media and in like politics and stuff, are lying on purpose, especially with the Project 2025 stuff.
Yeah.
Considering they keep pushing it over and over again, even though the Trump administration has put out, or Trump campaign has put out, that was presumptuous of me, has put out some pretty firm and sometimes rather aggressive towards the poor put upon Heritage Foundation statements on the issue. But the media doesn't care because they can use it and they'll just keep using it. And the people who don't bother to either don't care or don't bother to look into what the truth is will keep parroting it.
Yeah. Or what 2025 really says.
Yeah.
No, they're not.
Cut down all the forest. It doesn't say that.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. I mean, we're going to move on to the third item here because I want Anthony to weigh in on that one. But, you have to say something fast and succinctly. And Donald Trump should just say, if you were sincere about reversing your EV mandate and appliance mandates, the environmental left would be going crazy and attacking you. They are silent because they know you're lying. All right. So, and then on oil and gas drilling. Now, Anthony, Trump on stage at the Republican National Convention said, drill, baby, drill. Got to thank Sarah Palin for giving us that mantra. And then he says we're going to be energy independent again. But, the Biden and Harris administration could push back on this by saying that we are setting oil and gas records every year under their administration. So how, when that is inevitably brought up, if that topic's even brought up, how does he answer that?
Well, when you shut it down and then you start it up again, it's really easy to generate a new record, right? And I think that's what's going on here. They're basically... they're going out and just providing lip service to the environmentalist, but then going and doing the complete opposite, but not talking about it. And I want to go back to something I talked about before, and that's the word climate crisis. And I just sent a link to our producer, Andy, in the chat to show the explosion of the use of the phrase climate crisis. This is from Google's Ngram viewer. And, for some reason, there it is. There it is. Look at that. It is a marketing tool. It exploded literally around 2016. It's a hockey stick. Just like the hockey stick, it's bogus.
But it's a real hockey stick. It's based on real data that the press colluded all at once to say, just like that. I bet you'd see a similar hockey stick if you went from global warming to climate change. I bet for a decade it was all global warming, and then suddenly a spike climate change.
Right.
And then when climate change wasn't having the intended effect, when climate change wasn't having the intended effect, it went boom, climate crisis. And they all colluded on this. They said, we've got to make this scarier. We're not getting our message across.
Yeah. Climate crisis, the phrase, is nothing more than a marketing tool, plain and simple. And it's a marketing tool for the gullible who don't bother to look past the phrase.
Well, and the crazy thing with that extreme jump there too is they were already pretty well the establishment well before they started introducing that. I mean, like every multinational corporation, every public school in America was already like hyper focused on climate change stuff well before, this is as early as like 2007, I would say. Because when I was in high school, or middle school, I was in a pilot program where they had climate change as the focus of every class that we took. So it was, climate change in our English class, climate change in our science classes, like just everywhere across the board. And that, boy, was that was a time. But anyway, but they were already entrenched. So obviously there's something that they are, unsure about in terms of their continued standing. So they have to ramp up the what word am I looking for? Ramp up the rhetoric just about every year, it seems. Now it's catastrophe. Climate crisis is like last year.
Yeah, it's climate catastrophe now. Yeah, it's always something new. That's funny. We do keep track of that. All right, and just quickly before we get to Q&A, I know we have a lot of them in the chat today, but if climate and energy policy is brought up in the debate on Tuesday, they're probably going to want to give Kamala Harris a chance to brag about the green power transition that she and her administration are leading. Sterling, how should Trump respond if she's allowed to brag about the so-called green energy transition?
Tell me how much fossil fuel we used for energy before you came into office and how much we're using now. You'll find out it's almost the same percentage. Tell me how much you're spending on green energy that's not cheap and doesn't provide reliable power. How many grid failures have we had since you came into office compared to what came before? How much have energy prices risen since you came into office compared to what came before? That speaks for itself. You don't need to get into personalities. Just say, truly, in your pocketbook, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago?
Well, are your energy prices, is your electricity bill lower today than it was?
Are your food prices? Because food is very energy intensive.
Yeah.
Fertilizer, that's fossil fuels. Fuel for tractors and for tractor trailers and for refrigeration systems, that's fossil fuels. Your pesticides, fossil fuels. You don't get the food we have now with a massive use of fossil fuels. And as those have gone up, prices have gone up.
Yep. All right. Well, we'll see if they bring this up in the debate. This was our only chance to talk about it because the debate's going to come and go, and it's going to be the only one, I guarantee you. So at least we've been able to cover it here. Let's get to the Q&A here from our wonderful audience here in the chat.
Me too, Matt G. Me too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Brainwashing does not work on Linnea. So here we go.
No, my brain is too smooth. All of their brainwashing slides right off. Okay, so this is a question from Engineer Guy who just posted. I think Sterling might know the answer to this one. So where are we right now on the CAFE standards and regulations?
Well, when we talk about the EV mandate, it is not actually a direct mandate. What it is part of the CAFE standards, the energy regulations, in particular the emission regulations, and they have said themselves that their emission regulations by 2035 will ensure that 65% or more of the vehicles on the road are electric or hydrogen vehicles. To ensure that, it means we know fossil fuel powered internal combustion engines, be they clean diesel, be they energy efficient hybrids, be they energy efficient gasoline powered cars, they can't meet those standards. It's a backdoor mandate. And they say 65%, but that's how it was done. There's no regulation that says you must stop selling these on date certain. No, it just says if you can't meet these standards, you can't sell them.
Yep, it's almost always something like that too. So when people on the like pro-renewable side or on the climate alarm side argue that there are no EV mandates, there is no banning of gas stoves, whatever, it's
Right.
because they're playing semantic games.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
pretty gross, actually. Here's a question from Christopher Palmer, who's a longtime watcher of ours. He says, appreciate you guys and Linnea. Would you agree that one approach would be to acknowledge slight warming, we are in an interglacial, but that there is no proof that rising CO2 drives temperature rising? And I would pitch this one to Anthony.
Well, this has been debated since the whole issue ever started. And I would point this out. Yes, carbon dioxide does have an effect on the atmosphere's temperature. But the first 200 parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere create the most effect. Without carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, the Earth would be significantly colder, like 34 degrees Fahrenheit, something like that. So it does have an effect, but it's only really significant in the first 100 to 200 parts per million. After that, it becomes logarithmic and it tapers off. It gets saturated, the effect in the atmosphere. And so the more CO2 you add, the less the temperature goes up. As far as whether temperature leads or lags CO2, that's been a debate, but there is some indication from ice cores that due to outgassing from the oceans, as the Earth warmed up naturally, CO2 came out of the oceans after the warming. So it works both ways, but we are of the belief that yes, CO2 does have an effect on the atmosphere, but no, it's not a crisis.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why there are no really, in my opinion anyway, there are no really good gotcha climate answers that are super good and accurate for like bumper stickers and for debate, quips. I think probably if you want to see what I think is the best example of a politician actually kind of, or a would-be politician getting pretty darn close to a perfect answer on that stuff would be Vivek Ramaswamy's comments. I think we have a video of it on our channel somewhere here that he made last year. And I don't recall exactly what context it was that he was talking about it in. I don't know if you guys remember, but he made a pretty good argument for kind of a, not quite a lukewarm position, but a, the science is still out. We're still trying to determine what exactly the effects are. But that doesn't mean that we need to collapse our economy and install global communism.
Right.
That's probably the angle that I
Oh.
would recommend Trump take, is not to try and chase down all of the science, because there's always going to be an exception somewhere. But to pivot to, does this actually mean that we need to give up fossil fuels though?
Well, but there is an answer, and it's not that hard. You can look around the world, and it turns out that wealthier societies are better off in the face of any kind of climate change they face. So make people wealthier faster. Get poverty-stricken people. Everyone says, oh, the poor Africans and the poor Asians and the poor South Americans, they will suffer most from the climate crisis. No, they suffer most from lack of access to fossil fuels, which help development.
Yep. Well, we have more questions to go, but Anthony Watts will not be here to answer them. He has to boogie. So
yeah, I do want to say two final things, and then I got to take off because I got to rush off to my mailbox to check and see if I've got a check from Big Oil, because apparently we're getting them. Anyway, the point I want to make about carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is that climate science still has two major unresolved issues. Number one, climate sensitivity. And you can go to climateataglance.com and look up climate sensitivity. This is how much temperature goes up for a doubling of CO2. It is all over the map. It's anywhere from 0.5 degrees centigrade all the way up to like 7 degrees centigrade. Science has not nailed that one down. And then number two, they have not nailed down the fact that the residence time of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, they don't know. It could be anywhere from 4 years up to over 1,000+ years if you listen to Michael Mann, but they don't have that nailed down either. So with these two large uncertainties, how do we really know how much effect carbon dioxide has on our temperature? We don't. It's all speculation.
Yeah.
Anyway, I got to go. I appreciate the time you guys spent with us today. Appreciate all the questions. And we'll see you back here, I guess, in 2 weeks, right, Jim?
Yes, we're not going to, I was going to announce that at the end, but we have our 40th anniversary benefit dinner at the Heartland Institute on Friday, a week from today, September 13th. You can still get tickets and join us in Chicago. It's going to be at the historic Hilton Chicago downtown. Go to heartland.org for more information, but we'll be so busy doing that we won't have a show, but we'll be back 2 weeks from now. And that's when Anthony will be back. We're going to stick around and keep answering some more questions, but see you later, Anthony. All right.
Cool. Okay, so this is a question regarding the bridges and like infrastructure being influenced or being affected by climate change topic from Nate Schrager, who was here earlier. I'm not sure if he's still here, but I do want to get to this question. He goes, why attack this point? There are actual good arguments for why climate change exists and will affect things like crops. I guess to expand on that, I guess what he's asking is why go after the point that climate change may have an impact on infrastructure, right? Because obviously, and there is a modest sea level and very gradual sea level rise, and you would expect that to be happening coming out of a glacial period. In fact, you would hope that would happen because that means that you've got some ice melt going. Wouldn't you expect there to be damage to infrastructure over time? I guess is what the question would be.
Well, I'm not sure that's what he's asking, but if he is, I guess I would say all else things being equal, if you never do anything else than what you're doing now, yeah, likely. That's like saying if the Dutch hadn't built dikes and windmills to pump water out, they'd be underwater because they're underwater. They're under sea level. So will it affect infrastructure? Well, that depends on whether we maintain the infrastructure. 1 degree temperature rise. By the way, this summer, this particular summer in the U.S. wasn't hotter than normal. The globe may be hotter than normal, but the U.S. was not, and Maine was not. So I guess my response would be, if we never did anything to anything and climate changes, whether it gets colder or warmer, it will have an impact. But we can mitigate those impacts by planning, by becoming wealthier, by taking, A, maintaining our infrastructure, B, building things that help reduce sea level rise, or not reduce sea level rise, but reduce subsidence. We can stop draining wetlands in critical areas. We can do all sorts of things that would prevent climate change from damaging our infrastructure. But it takes an investment in adaptation. And that's not where we're spending our money. Instead, we're trying to spend our money on reducing carbon dioxide, which will have no effect of preventing climate change.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I quite get the why respond to a thing about infrastructure. I mean, it is obvious that the infrastructure problem, if any infrastructure problems we have in the United States, are not due to climate change. They're due to passing so-called infrastructure bill after infrastructure bill after infrastructure bill, supposedly pointing trillions of dollars to fix our roads and bridges, and none of it ever seems to get fixed because it's all grift and graft, or in the case of the Biden-Harris administration, it's for green energy funding infrastructure. It's not for actually bridges and roads. But this story in particular talked about how flooding is going to be dangerous and bring bridges down like Tinkertoys. Well, Andy's brought up the page here. This is from climateataglance.com. This is also featured in a video that Linnea has done on floods. And you can see that the cost of flooding in the United States, the economic damage from floods in the United States, has gone down dramatically over the last century. There is no dramatic uptick. There actually doesn't even exist that flooding caused by CO2 emissions by humans. It's just not a thing. And so this needs to be pushed back on, because the New York Times and other mainstream media outlets, believe it or not, a lot of people do get their news from those outlets, and they do trust them. And so that's what we're here to do. We have to push back and tell the truth. So.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's see. We've got, how about this one from our friend Albert? He says, how will EVs replace heavy hauling trucks and construction vehicles?
They won't.
Yeah. I throw up my hands. I've got no answer to that. In fact, they won't. unless you create much heavier hauling vehicles and trucks, you can create battery. They're trying to do battery powered trucks. They're trying to do that. But they won't do the job that fossil fuel powered trucks do. How long it takes a truck to get across the country from one location to another with gasoline, and with stops to sleep overnight. But how much longer will it take for a long haul truck that's battery powered, that only gets has can find level 2 chargers when they haven't been stripped of their copper, when the credit card reader works, or when they're shipping to an isolated location where there's not a electric vehicle port, an EV outlet. It won't work. And it's not just trucks. Look, there's a reason why auto company after auto company after auto company is backing off from their plans for electric vehicles. Ford, Volvo was a leader. Volvo said by 2030, we will sell no vehicle, 2030, no vehicle with an internal combustion engine. Well, they said, well, not so much now. We're going to keep selling those things. We're going to start building some hybrids. We'll still sell some electric vehicles, but we're not getting rid of the internal combustion engine. Auto company after auto company is doing that.
Well, put aside the passenger vehicles and the long haul trucks, which are already in the separate issue. You are not going to see a Caterpillar, for instance, making huge backhoes and this enormous equipment that needs to, like, for instance, build a road. You cannot do that with electric power. You just cannot. A crane that is building a skyscraper, you cannot do that under electric power. There's a reason why diesel engines rule the game when it comes to needing a lot of power in a small space. It can't be replicated anymore. Well, you don't have gasoline engines on these things. Diesel is used for a reason.
Look, there's a reason why no hospitals have big battery packs as backup during emergencies.
Yeah.
Not a single one. They have diesel or they have natural gas.
Right.
I think I take a little bit more of a moderate approach on this, because I would not say never, but it's going to depend on battery, like revolutionary battery technology that we don't have right now. But that's, like I've said in the past, I don't think it's a good idea to plan infrastructure on technology that doesn't exist yet. So it would be like putting in a bunch of up in the air stoplights for the flying cars that we're definitely going to get any day now. I don't know. It's just it doesn't seem like a good idea. But I will say that there actually is a lot of mining equipment is electric right now, but it's umbilical electric. So it's like plugged into probably a diesel generator, but big heavy mining equipment, they don't want to bring something that, has exhaust down into a mine. So
I mean, there are practical applications, of course, in certain instances, but we're not going to see a road grader powered by an electric motor with battery power anytime soon.
Probably not anytime soon. Okay, we don't have a whole lot of questions today. We do have another one from Engineer Guy that I would like to address, that says, what is China and India doing about the climate crisis when they're building fossil fuel plants? How much of our effort is impacting climate compared to theirs? And I will say, this is a true, if you take the claims of the decarbonization crowd seriously, that we do need to stop emitting carbon dioxide. If you take that, then you say, yeah, China and India are outpacing us, in emissions. And so anything that we do is going to be swamped out by that. But I'm starting to see this argument get picked up a little bit too enthusiastically, I think, by a lot on the right, where their entire focus now, like with a bill that they're trying to put through. Oh, what is it called? My mind is actually mashed potatoes today, but the Prove It Act, right? The Prove It Act. Thank you, Sterling. Where they're trying to collect data on all American industries so that they can prove that our industries emit less than China and India do. But really, it's just a data collection policy so that they can put in some like carbon taxes and stuff on our own industries, basically, or on tariffs on incoming goods from those countries, that kind of thing, based on their bad, naughty emissions. And I think that's a mistake to lean too hard into that argument, but maybe you guys have a different take on it.
No, I agree with that. I think you're conceding too much of the alarmist message on that, as if, emissions are a big evil and a bad thing and are going to destroy the planet. If you go forward like you just described, you give up way too much ground on that actually doesn't have any scientific truth or backing to it.
I'd say this. China and India did make commitments under Paris. They weren't our type of commitments. They said they would peak their emissions by a certain date, different dates for different countries. Not that they would decline, but that they would peak. But I agree with both Linnea and Jim. I think Trump addressed this once. My thinking on China and India and Russia, well, less Russia with the Ukraine invasion, what's going on there. But China and India is that they were doing what's best for their people. And that's what their government should be doing. We shouldn't try and manage the world. We're the United States of America. We have a president who's elected to defend and uphold our Constitution and enforce our laws in our country, not be a global leader. No, he's the leader of the United States. China's leader is the leader of China. India's leader is the leader of India, and they're doing what they feel is best for their peoples and nations. That's what every country should be doing. And so we should be following their example rather than enforcing rules which harm our economy, especially relative to theirs. Put America first.
There we go. That's our exiting line today. I'm going to pop up a nice comment that was original to this show. No one ever said that before. Okay, this is a really nice comment that I just wanted to share with you guys from SRB. He says, forget the oil money. You guys are already doing an incredible job. If it weren't for Heartland Institute, I would not have known about Dr. Happer and Dr. Soon. Thank you so much, SRB. That really means a lot to us.
Thank you. I saw that earlier.
It sure does. And there was a comment there earlier that somebody said that in the 90s, he believed Al Gore, and now he doesn't. And now he's a fan of this program. I mean, it's not that this program, deprogrammed him, but it is an actually very encouraging sign that minds can be opened, that discussions can be had, and that those things happen right here on the Climate Realism Show. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching and listening. We will not be here next Friday, but we will be here 2 Fridays from now. Just a reminder to leave a comment underneath this video if you disagree with us, and we do get people who do. That's just fine. We will listen to them, and we may even respond, or we'll read them and we will respond. I want to thank again our streaming partners, junkscience.com, What's Up With That, and CFACT, which runs Climate Depot. Always visit heartland.org. Always visit climateataglance.com, climaterealism.com, and tune into this show every single Friday.
And sign up for Climate Change Weekly.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry, Sterling. I drive him crazy. Subscribe to Climate Change Weekly, which actually goes out every Friday morning, or just about every Friday morning. You can subscribe at heartland.org/subscribe. Climate Change Weekly is fantastic. You don't want to miss that. So thank you all for listening. I apologize, Sterling. And we will see you again in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.
Joe. You're gonna be the next president of the United States.